Hello again, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Barbara Iverson. I'm the moderator for today's episode, yes, Digital Dialogue. For the benefit of participants who are blind or have a visual impairment, all speakers will begin with a short visual description. So my name is Barbara Iverson. I am a white woman with shoulder length blonde hair. I'm wearing black glasses and a bright pink dress. A decade ago, at a time when the digitalization of our societies had already advanced, innovative ideas were put forward on how technology could be used to foster participation and democracy. The experiments at the time with the concept of liquid democracy serve as good examples for that. However, the technological landscape is transforming at lightning speed, and recent new developments, such as generative artificial intelligence, have hit the headlines. Assuming that democracy and social justice are the fabric of our societies, rather than, for instance, oppression and exploitation, questions arise on the societal impact of these technologies. What are the new challenges and opportunities in view of the arrival of AI? Especially civil society organizations advocating and engaging for social justice are asking themselves how best they should be leveraging AI and emerging technologies for social impact and civic engagement. Is the disruption of liberal democracy, its principles and processes as we know them, around the corner? Will AI be a boost or a threat? So given the broad scope of the topic, we have asked the panelists to put special emphasis on the impact AI may have for minority and marginal social groups. What are the risks lurking on the horizon? Or, put more positively, what could be the opportunities for civil society organizations to promote democratic rights and social justice for those groups? So, to help us discuss these questions and more, we are delighted to welcome as panelists today Paula Lopez, who is a researcher at the Department of Legal Philosophy at the University of Vienna. We'll also welcome Umut Pájaro Velázquez, who is a researcher and professor on issues related to the ethics and governance of AI in Colombia. And we're also welcoming Dr. A.H. Manjurul Kabir, who is Senior Advisor and Global Team Leader for Gender Equality and Disability Inclusion at UN Women in New York. All right, now that you know their names, I am going to welcome Paula first to turn on your video, turn on your camera, and unmute yourself. Hi, Paula. I'm going to give you about 5 to 7 minutes to introduce yourself, give the key points of what you've been working on and your perspective on this topic, and don't forget to start with a self-description.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. Hello, my name is Paula. My hair is dark brown. I wear it at shoulder length, and I also wear glasses. So I'm a mathematician, and right now I'm working on an interdisciplinary PhD thesis at the Faculty of Law at the University of Vienna in Austria. And I'm very happy to be here, and thanks so much for the invitation. So today I will focus my input on generative AI. So generative AI systems produce text or images, and we've already heard a lot about ChatGPT in the last couple of months, of course. So I'm going to talk about 2 aspects behind these AI systems. First aspect is data. So the mathematical material of AI systems is data, lots of data. And this has not always been the case. In the 60s, AI research was very different. But now, if you look at the production aspect of AI systems, one always needs a lot of data. One has to analyze many, many images to build an image generator, and one has to analyze so much text to build a text generator like ChatGPT. But not data in any form, because the data needs to be processed and curated and labeled and filtered through and annotated. So behind data lies human labor. And data is not a technical thing, but a deeply social thing. So that's the first thing, data. Second thing is we also need big computer power. We need big capacities and lots of energy that goes into analyzing this data and finding patterns. So these are the two aspects, data and computing power. And these two aspects, let's look at these two aspects through the question of who invests the work and who gets the benefits. So first, data. We do the work, actually. We share stuff on platforms, we edit Wikipedia. Everything that we make available on the internet can basically be used for AI model training. So open access research, my research papers can be used for training open access articles, blog posts, anything that is openly available. So we make ourselves and our content available for data mining. So these AI systems are deeply parasitic in nature. Their production feeds off of our free labor on the internet. And also, people who get paid very little money manually filter through vast amounts of data to make it less toxic. So that's the first aspect, lots of human labor involved. The second aspect is computing power. So even though all this data is available on the internet, one needs very good computers and very expensive computers to analyze those large amounts. So there is a centralized element to it. And only organizations with resources can analyze this data and create AI models. So big tech companies. And it took so much computing powers. It took supercomputers to train ChatGPT. So in summary, the very mathematics of AI systems takes unpaid labor by platform users, Wikipedia users, and so on, as well as low paid labor of people curating and pre-processing the data. And with centralized computing powers, these systems are then created. So the openness of the internet, how the internet is supposed to be open to all, kind of gets subverted and turned into a product. So it's all actually like a big cosmic joke. So AI has an inherently anti-democratic aspect to it. It takes from the masses and concentrates value with those who already have resources. And then, on the other hand, these systems make it look like magic. It feels like creating an image from nothing. You just type in a word and you get an image, or you type in a little prompt and then you get a text seemingly from nothing, but it's not coming from nothing. So also when we use such a product, we make ourselves very dependent on the company who built this product. So we have no control over the tools and no meaningful agency. We need a stable internet connection at all times to use ChatGPT, for example. And many people I have talked to, they say everybody is using ChatGPT, so I am using it too, so that I don't get left behind, which turns into some kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. Because if everybody uses it, just because everybody uses it, let's just be more careful with the use of these technologies and think about whether we really need to implement such a thing that builds on so many resources. So in conclusion, I would advise us all to be very mindful and careful when using such a product.
Paula, thank you so much. For now, you can turn off your camera and remute yourself. Great. And I will ask Umut in Cartagena, Colombia, to turn on your camera, unmute yourself, and share with us about the work that you've been doing. Hi, Umut.
Hi everyone, my website, well, I'm Umut Velasquez. I'm a Black person, and not Black, non-binary person, and bald, and I'm dressed in a black and white shirt. Well, Uh, when they asked me to be part of this panel, I started to thinking on the consequences of this technology have on LGBTQI people, because mainly my work is a combination of activism and academia, because I'm right now working as an AI researcher and professor, and also an activist for around 50, 16 years by now. What I decided to talk about that because mainly when we talk um, about democracy, we are talking about rights and the rights of the minorities mainly. And and as a black person, and then also as a queer person, I decide to express how AI can affect the rights of people or people that is marginalized and underrepresented and we see that right now pretty much in many applications on AI, especially on applications that are used by governments in daily basis, and also in applications that we use in our personal personal devices, as for example, or cell phones. When we try to use the facial recognition, sometimes when you are a person of color, sometimes you need to have so much light in front of you to only a camera to be able to recognize you. And that is a problem that needs to be solved by the design of these applications. And that is part of the solution that I'm going to explain later. Um, Not only that, but also another day, as I like to call it, daily use or daily applications of AI, you had um, you had these kinds of risks or threats to the rise of the uh, marginalized and underrepresented people. And that's why, because the data, as explained Paola before, the data is mainly based in a lot of concentrate. It comes from a specific place, and it comes from a specific place. It's always going to exacerbate the disparities between one population and another. And that shouldn't be the case that shouldn't be the case if we want to develop new technologies such as AI, because it should be benefit a lot of us. It actually has some benefits from us. For example, in the medical field, we have some benefit from women in identifying some kind of disease in early stages, and also in the comparison of medical histories, in no matter the gender, you can have a better diagnosis when you're using AI. But it's not the case when you use it for surveillance, when you use it for speech recognition, or you use it for uh, test for generative AI. In the case of generative AI, text recognition or facial recognition, we have a lot of bias in those technologies. And why we have a lot of bias in those technologies? Well, it's the answer. It seems pretty obvious and easy. Is because we're missing in the AI in the early stages of AI life cycle, the presence or a meaningful participation of people that is underrepresented and historically marginalized. Why is this happening? It's because probably most of the people that is queer or people of color actually are included in more in the implementation part of the technologies. That's as far as I know, they always are included more in the implementation part of the technology to know how the results affect them, but know how the result how we can prevent that those results actually can have an impact on their lives and guarantee the rights as anyone from the beginning and not from the later stages of the AI life cycle. So my solution to this kind of issue is actually to include all these people in a meaningful way from the design and the development of this technology, but not only include people of color just because included or include queer people just because, but also included in a way that they can evaluate this system when they are implemented. So it means that these people can also be able to make audit of the system. That means that we need to create a artificial intelligence that could be fairness, accountable, transparent, and ethical in a way that can be understood by everyone, not only by the people that design and develop that technology. So we need to create like a common language that could be understood by anyone. In the case, by anyone, for example, that technical can address issues about gender rights in the same way that a policymaking can address those issues, and also the academia can address those issues in order to create a less biased technologies in the future. Yeah, that would be it.
Umut, thank you very much. You can turn off your camera and remute yourself, and I will ask Manjarul, who is in New York, to join us. Join me here, turn on your camera and unmute yourself. Hi, welcome. Please start us off with your key points and start with a self-description.
Thank you. So I'm an international development professional, as a moderator alluded to, and a political scientist. I'm a brown, middle-aged man with almost black hair. I would rather call it salt and pepper and beard, wearing check shirt with matte black frame and white glasses. Thank you very much for the opportunity. As my co-panelists already addressed some of the aspect, I would go directly to the title actually. And the way I put it, I don't know, some of you might remember in early 2002, UN and UNDP published a human development report, which is called Deepening Democracy in a Fragmented World, which raised a lot of attention to the policy discourse on democracy. That report didn't talk about, of course, artificial intelligence in 2002 and previously some of the relevant reports of other international organizations as well. I'm calling it now Deepening Democracy in an AI-enabled world, and it really changes the number of aspects. My respected co-panelists already mentioned one of the aspiration of democracy is, of course, majority rule and protection of minorities. Now, how the whole discourse of AI, and by AI, obviously, I'm not only indicating ChatGPT, which created a lot of enthusiasm in 2022, last couple of years. But if you think about deep machine learning, and then, of course, the smartphones, social media, the way all of these technology are capturing popular participation aspects and then being used for corporate and other purposes, including by states, for both policy area, for areas which are good for climate change aspects, for widening popular participation, but it also raises a lot of concern of interference in the electoral process and deep use of deep fake, you name it. And there are concerns of bias, concern of promoting stigma. So all these things forced actually the UN Security Council to host a special session, not only looking at democracy, but other security sector challenges. In fact, during summer of this year, July, there was a dedicated session, 18 July, to be specific, where the Security Council considered whether artificial intelligence poses international peace and stability. Now, they asked some of the aspects they covered in that discussion is not part of today's discussion. We are focusing more on democracy and democratic processes. But as I really mentioned about the protection of minority aspect, I also want to go back to the discussion last year at the Human Rights Council, where UN Special Rapporteur on Persons with Disabilities presented a report that which called AI and how it impacted on the person with disabilities and their life. And the special rapporteur actually did mention that, yes, there are challenges, but it also created a lot of opportunities for assistive technology, a lot of opportunities for connecting people to the political processes who are otherwise probably would not have been connected. And it's not only about persons with disabilities. If you think about ethnic minorities, my colleague mentioned about LGBTIQ, there are also indigenous population, rural women, you name it. The persons who had intersectional challenges to be part of the electoral process, to be a part of the democratic process, be part of the developmental process. Now, in terms of the AI and democracy, for the interest of the time, I'll just raise a couple of points for discussion, perhaps. It's an interesting discourse because improving democratic process, as we are considering that one of the AI potential, at the same time, this potential could be challenges. For example, AI can understand individual preference very well, right? It can help voters make decisions. And by extension, it can increase participation. Other side of the coin could be, they can be also influenced. And we are seeing in the recent elections in a number of countries, I would not mention the country's name, there have been serious discussion in the policy circle that how AI really were used to influence or propagate certain kind of theories. And that creates challenges for democracy and human rights protection, which we thought are already settled. AI also have the ability to instantly spot fraud and corruption in the system. Yes, AI has this value of anti-corruption, and it also can be helpful for democratic processes. But at the same time, it can also be used to perpetuate some of the malpractices. So AI has the potential to give voters expanded authority, allowing more issues to come up for community input and public discussion, and therefore it can create the public space that we really are fighting for. But at the same time, this public space can be constrained if the national actors, governments started using it. So here is the challenge, and I will kind of close my deliberation with that challenges. We want all our governments and national actors and civil society actors be much more capacitated to use AI to optimize US, to harness full potential of public participation. At the same time, they can also contribute to shrinking democratic space. And that is the biggest challenge for me as a political scientist. While I agree the full potential and enormous benefit it is bringing, but how do you address the challenges? I look forward to hearing your views. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Manjurul. Please leave your camera on. I'll invite also Paula and Umut to turn their cameras back on and join us. Wonderful. So as a reminder to the audience, thank you for what you've already been putting into the chat. If anyone has questions that they have not already asked before the dialogue, you're very welcome to put them into the chat now. Or at any time during this discussion. We'll have space in a few minutes to start getting to those. But before we do, I wanted to open it up. So we've heard sort of the academic perspective on where AI is getting its information from. We heard that from Paula. We've heard from Umut about a sort of academic and activist perspective. And from his perspective, what's needed to get through some of these biases in the technology itself. And then Manjurul talking from even more of an activist perspective on the problems and the potential very strong positives of AI. So given that, thank you to the three of you. I'd like to see if you have questions for each other, that listening to each other has raised questions in your own minds, and I want to give space to that. So do any of you? Yes, Paula.
Yeah, thanks so much to the other panelists for their input. My first question is, I think, a super hard question, which is why I'm so happy that you are both here today. So Umut, you talked about including marginalized groups in the development and also in the evaluation processes of AI systems. But representation and participation are always also kind of ambivalent, because it can lead to surveillance, gathering more diverse data, more data from all these people, then we know everything about them. So how can we consolidate that tension, or how can we solve this problem? What are your takes? And I know it's it's a big question.
Well, it's a hard question to solve. It's actually, right now we are working with Query in AI, that is ONG that is in the States. We actually trying to resolve that because we want that part of the information that queer people want to share to this technology, because we want to be included in a way that our rights are respected, but at the same time, our privacy is respected. So that is mainly the tension, how much we can share in order that this private company that are developing this technology doesn't make surveillance on their bodies, because that's not the objective. The objective is to guarantee our rights as a human being, as the rest of the people. That is the objective here. But yeah, I don't have an answer yet. I would say that we're trying to get anonymize more than all the information that is possible to anonymize in order to get the information that is needed, but without affecting other rights for the queer LGBTQI people, for example. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Manjurul, do you have anything you'd like to add into this
I'll just probably add one thing to Paula's questions. That is, if you think that anonymity is, of course, one solution perhaps, but there have been so many social forums that have been automated, and anonymity has become really challenged. So I'm sort of really considering that identity would be exposed one day or tomorrow or some days. So that's a risk we need to factor in while looking at some of the democratic processes. So I think it is important that we developed and strengthen the protection mechanism, human rights protection mechanism further, because human rights protection mechanism, this is not the first challenge. If you think about whole human rights movement, there have been phases of challenges for the protection we developed, National Human Rights Commission, you name it, and then there are challenges. So I think we need to also further strengthen the democratic and human rights mechanisms that we have developed, so that the anonymity issues, yes, it is important to anonymize, but what happens when the identity is exposed? If we consider that, is our national institution, is our human rights mechanisms, is our international system really geared and strengthened enough to give the protection to the minorities when anonymity is no longer there. That would be my aspiration.
Thank you, Manjurul. I actually have another question for Umut as well. And this is based on something that you said when we met earlier this week. And that was the need to create a common language between academia and policymakers. And I found that really interesting. Could you talk a little bit about that for us?
Yes, well, in my few years researching this topic, I found out that some concepts, when you try to put it into policymaking, there is a lot you're missing. And there is a lot of what academia or what the experience of the people in the real life start to missing and start to force in a way the language that is what it was the objective of creating some theory or some of the conclusions on research isn't exactly the same. Isn't exactly the same thing that a policymaking is saying in the law. So that creates a problem because the rights of certain kind of people aren't being addressed in a way that is actually was the objective when you do the initial research. So for me, it's like we need to like educate more policymakers in the things that we are doing in the academia so they can understand in an easy way what we want them to achieve and we want them to do when they do a regulation, when they do a framework, or when they do a law. So yeah, it's pretty much that. It's like create a easy and understandable way between academia and policymaking so they can relate and they can talk with each other because sometimes it's a lot of misinterpretation and we get lost in translation sometimes. It's becoming hard, really hard. So this is also happening with the technical community when we try to translate the rights of the minorities into technical aspects. Also, is happening. So it's a more complicated thing to do. But yes, I would like to hear Paola on this because this is. I think she can say something about it.
Yeah, please do, Paula.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you, but it just really spoke to me because in my experience, the connection between academia and policy is so full of conflicts because academic research strives from or lives from doubt and conflict and discussions and ambiguity and things that are contested. But policy and legislation, they have to say one specific thing that then is the law or then is a policy. And in this nexus, there is often a conflict where from the policy side, it is expected to get like a direct pipeline of academic knowledge into a policy, and then you get a reasonable policy out as an output, like an algorithm as well. But there is no research, there is no one research. It's full of conflicts, and I think it's super hard, but all the more important to find these common grounds. So I completely agree.
Maybe thanks, Paula. I was looking at the comments, and can I look into one comments and respond to this, if moderator?
Sure.
Yeah. One of the comments that was asking about whether AI can look into the collective intelligence and collective policy solutions more, and whether that could be a solution for democratic challenges. Now, there is two aspects of it.
Wait, sorry, is this a question that's in the chat already? Okay,
yes, already.
Great. All right, good. Now I see
there
it.
Is, but it resonates well with what Paula was saying. And I think there's two aspects of it. One is this, of course, if you look at the three areas where we are seeing increasing democracy's role, empowering citizens, fighting corruption, reforming public administration so that it becomes much more public facing. These three areas, yes, collective intelligence, AI has a critical role. I think the challenge would be much more in the protection of minorities and also security sector, where security sector can be using these for different other purposes than the democracy and the fruits of democracy that we are talking about. And I think one open solution that keep coming is whether time has come to establish a global watchdog body on artificial intelligence, not only watchdog on the independent actors or entrepreneurs, but also whether states are violating their obligation under human rights treaties and convention by setting up rigorous control mechanism at the state level. So it's kind of a balancing in entrepreneurship spirit, but also looking at state interference and the possible sort of negative impact on human rights aspect of AI. And that could be one solution, but of course, that is not a solution for everything.
Thank you, Manjurul, for that. Anyone else want to add to that or have a different question for each other? If not, we'll start looking at the audience questions. All right, so we have some questions in the dialogue or in the chat here in Zoom, which is fantastic. You're very welcome to keep those coming. We've addressed one. I'm going to go back to questions that were asked by participants before the dialogue started. So that's always an option when you register. And one comes from Yasmin at CTIN, and that is, how do we overcome inherent bias in large AI data sets? And Paula, I think you had wanted to address this question.
Yeah, I think that's also one of the $1 trillion questions. There's so much work on bias already, and in my opinion, there's basically two very different kinds of biases in data. So one kind is when the data misrepresents reality. So if certain groups are not represented accurately, if we have too little diversity in images for the system to recognize faces, and so on. So if there is like a difference between data and reality, then this is one kind of bias, which can in theory be repaired by, as Umut already said, by including more diverse data. The other kind is if an algorithmic system has discriminatory or biased outcomes, not because the data is wrong, but because the data accurately represents the inequalities that are prevalent in society. This can happen a lot when, for example, you have data on income or on job positions. And in these labor market data, it says that women have that fewer women are in leading positions in companies. This is correct, but it's a reflection of an inequality within society. And if then a system is trained on this data and then replicates that and says, oh, women are just not as fit or as good in leading companies, this can create another kind of inequality. And in this case, debiasing will not work because the data is correct in that sense, but it correctly reflects inequalities that are there. So there are these two kinds, and I've encountered very often that one tries to remove bias, but the data is already correct. It just represents a reality that is unjust and that is full of inequalities. So that's a thing that I would always stress.
And as you mentioned before, you have, there's only specific companies that can collect that data and really use it to analyze it, and they have their own purposes in going into that, right? So you have people who are perhaps not aware that there's already bias built into the data, and then they're bringing their own additional biases into it because of how they want to use that data. Yeah, this feels like layering problem upon problem. All right, well, I want to go back into the chat, and as you may have realized, everyone, we're not going to come up with any super clean, easy answers today. But again, the point is this is a dialogue for all of us to learn and to have perhaps, hopefully, new takeaways on this topic. But Gina Wharton from Oxfam mentioned, Manjurul, that you made reference to the impact of AI on shrinking space. And could you give examples of challenges met and solutions to mitigate that? What I love about this question is some getting into some of the solution space.
Okay. No, thank you very much. I think shrinking democratic space is a concern for all of us for some time, and it predates AI, of course. What we are seeing that my colleague Paula and other panelists already mentioned, you have data, qualitative data that's being used by different actors. Whether we have oversight of those actors who are using either private sector, and that's a big area of concern because there's at the present moment, as we are speaking today, there's not much monitoring on the private sector. Then you have public sector and public governance institutions who are using this. And that is another area where many governments are working on how do you regulate and how do you make sure that any new laws, new policies are coming up are not affecting people's rights aspect, one element, and then there are other elements. So these two elements. But one thing we are realizing that unless you have a very robust constitutional framework and independence of pillars, which is not a new aspects, data will create and create more challenges for the democratic space. But then where you go to? You will go to probably judicial process. You will go to for your civil liberties, different or mechanisms or human rights mechanism, unless those mechanisms are, first of all, well capacitated about AI, number one. Number two is, are they really independent? If they are, then with capacitated independence, they can really thwart that threat coming to the public space. And then, of course, the third, very most important is the active civil society engagement, which is critical because civil society and the whole public space that we are talking about can play an important role in terms of countering the threat on democratic space, which we are fighting before, or now, and probably will be the same future. So these two would be, I will combine the two: civil society activism, human rights activism, which is probably now not at the same level we used to see before because of the social media, and everyone is very active in social media, but not necessarily in the real field that we are seeing. And secondly, how our national actors and regional actors and global actors are capacitated and then independently functioning the role of the monitoring on AI and its impact.
Okay, thank you so much. Paula or Umut, do you have anything you want to add on to that? I think we're shifting a little bit, or we can, into the space of what exactly civil society organizations can be doing. There was a question from Adama Coulibaly from Oxfam as well, who asked about the role of international civil society organizations in shaping AI governance and policy to ensure it's democratic and inclusive, especially for communities often left out of the decision-making process. And Manjurul, I feel like you've touched on this. Umut, you wanted to address this question, so I'll turn it over to you.
Well, right now, the role of international civil society organizations in this aspect or in AI governance is it has to do a lot with monitoring what exactly this company are doing and how to shape the AI we want as a final users of civil society. Because right now there is no mechanisms developed around the world actually to monitor this kind of AI and monitor private companies. But so pretty much it's our work in inside of this ecosystem of AI governance right now. And I don't think besides that we need to do anything else because right now civil society has a really limited space in the conversation on AI governance, especially in high places. I don't want to mention what exactly in which organization then they are limiting the spaces of civil society. But it's my experience as a person that is working inside of this. But I'm seeing that with concern because they are actually limiting the our participation on what we want, what we have to say inside of certain spaces of AI governance, and especially focusing on academia in the global north or technicals in the global north, and a lot to the governments and the private sector. So for a person that is living in the global south, that is having an experience in the global south, and I say this in the last few months a lot, we need to continue saying all the things that needs to be changed about AI and continue monitoring and auditing these technologies and how these technologies are being applied inside our states and how these private companies are applying it. Even not in other states, even probably because they wanted to do it because they are a private company in around the world. Just that.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other voices want to join into that? All right. Well, we also had a question, and I think, Manjurul, you touched on this in your opening key points, but I think it's potentially very valuable, and that would be to talk about what are the ways that AI can be a boost to democracy? What are the ways that international civil society organizations can get behind the progress of AI around the world? So what could that look like? What could the benefits be? Manjurul, I'm going to come to you first, but I would love for all three of you to address this.
Thank you very much. A couple of points. One is, of course, as I was alluding to, that AI is working on individual preferences and data, right? So it can certainly help individuals and voters to make an informed decision. Sometimes that is a big question mark if a country's political spectrum is dominated by one or two actors, or sometimes hereditary politics, all these things. So that gives a fresh break and more source of information to make a informed judgment or decision. Then, of course, you have the whole aspect of the tracking fraud, corruption, malpractices, and identifying it, and then trying to find out a solution. Once you identify it, forces certain actors to act. Unless it's identified, sometimes it is not acted on, although people are aware of these things are happening, but nobody complained, nobody raised voice. So giving the voice and agency is a critical area. Third is also, it allows voters to drill down and get the facts straight on any decision before they make it. AI has the potential to give voters expanded authority. So there would be much more community input and public discussions happening around. So it's no longer managed discussion, managed discussion process that we have seen that international financial institution even organize for poverty reduction strategy paper in the past, right, for budgetary discussion. So it becomes much more civic engagement. And then ability to cancel out negative campaigning, bias reporting. People might argue against it, but it also gives you an opportunity to track what are the bias reporting. Now, of course, we are facing a lot of challenges in terms of minority representation, recruitment, and then representation of women, and particularly where AI is not benefiting, particularly the development process of AI is not benefited from the inputs of the minority groups, because they are not only user, they should be part of the formulative process as well. Often you saw all this technological nuanced inputs are coming in, but there has not been any process of input generation from the marginalized groups, the minorities. The voices of the minorities in the formation of the AI improvement and technological development is critical. They're not necessarily only target groups or users. They're also the foundational input provider. And I think that is missing currently. And I would like to focus much more on that. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Paula, anything you'd like to add on some of the benefits that you see of how AI can really be a benefit for democracy and how we see that around the world? What do you think?
I'm generally very critical, so I'm going to make a maybe meta comment on that. I think AI and algorithms have the potential to politicize everyone, because political processes, if they are governed by algorithmic systems, they can be criticized and this can be made transparent. And one fantastic example was an algorithmic system that was going to be used in the UK to predict grades of students when they could not take their exams due to COVID, and all was going well. But then they found out that it was highly discriminatory. And then all these students and all these organizations, everyone went to the streets with the slogan #FuckTheAlgorithm, and they all united in this political project. And this would not have been possible if it were just biased humans making the decisions, but you have to have like an algorithmic system to rebel against. So I think in this way, it can be a good catalyst for political like substance in society, in civil society.
Absolutely. That's a great example. Thank you. All right. And then finally, we're running out of time, but Umut, do you have any benefits that you would like to add in just a couple words?
Well, for me, the main benefits that could bring AI is that actually, if we include the people in the way that should be included from the early stages of AI, we actually going to have a more equal right for everyone. It's pretty much that. It's kind of summarize what I've been saying all this time.
Absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate that including all voices, because this is such a big issue, is essentially creating democracy in that space as well. So thank you to all three of you, to Paula, Umut, and Mandarul. Thank you for being here with us today. That's all the time we have. We're wrapping it up. And thank you so much to our international sign interpreters and our captioner for their work. Finally, thanks to all of you for joining us today and all of your great questions and engagement. We appreciate you being here with us.